All I wanted was a job where I didn't know anybody, and where nobody knew me. I found it working security in the metro. The company was desperate for people, and why not? It's a shitty job. I could have told you that even before I started. You spend all day in a sunless, concrete tube. You spend all day dealing with addicts, criminals, their victims, and the mentally disturbed. Not a single person you interact with is happy to see you. I knew going in that work was going to be unpleasant. I just didn't expect it to be horrifying as well. None of that was on my mind while I was signing the paperwork, though. I wore a smug grin, confident that I'd never see any of the people from my old job again. And that was all I cared about. They'd been my best friends, and working with them was a dream come true. At first. But bad financial decisions and relationship drama destroyed in 2 months what we'd spent over 5 years building together. The truth was, I hoped that spending all day surrounded by the grimy charcoal smell of the metro would drive away the bitter taste that still lingered in my mouth. After several weeks of soul-sucking training, so basically, you can't defend yourself physically. I mean, we don't want a lawsuit. And boring patrols with my angry, racist coworkers. Why didn't you stop that guy? Don't you know those ones always run? My manager called me into his office. How are things going so far? I gave him a grim smile. He nodded. That was about what he had expected, it seemed. Then he did an odd thing. He closed the office door and started scratching behind his ear with a pen. Like he was nervous about something. I noticed that his shirt was rumpled and untucked. There were bags beneath his eyes. I'm sending you to Station X. I'm not going to name locations here. Your partner is Hans. No patrolling, just stand on the platform. Keep an eye out. Ugh, Hans. He was probably the most cynical person I'd ever met. Hans' goal each day was to put forth the absolute minimum amount of effort possible until he could retire at the end of the year. No one liked him. And between getting stuck with Hans and the manager's nervous tick, I already knew it was going to be a shit assignment. I just didn't know why. Not then. Station X wasn't in a rough neighborhood. There weren't any football matches or political rallies in the area. So why all the secrecy? Hans knew more than me, that was for sure. He spent every second he could away from that platform. First, it was a bathroom break. Then a cigarette break. Then a phone call. One of the engineers upstairs needed to see him. They were trying to fix the lights. The excuses were endless. And as annoying as Hans was, anything was better than standing guard alone. They size you up. The roving bands of teenagers. The junkie pickpockets with dirty needles in their pockets. The football hooligans. Should we jump this guy? Their eyes say. Maybe it would be fun. There's nobody around to save this pig now. The first treat of the day was a pale, skinny kid having some kind of fit. Kept screaming about how there were demons chasing him. They were gonna take control of him and make him do bad things he didn't want. And so on. I got him calmed down enough to bring him to the exit and the real police. Next was the blonde lady in a red jacket and heels. She didn't give me any trouble, but I couldn't just leave her sitting there crying to herself on a bench. 10 years, she kept saying. Don't understand it. Apparently she'd bumped into her ex on the metro by pure chance. I gave her some tissues and got her on her way. Then came a grandmother whose wallet had been stolen. She lived in the neighborhood. Said the thieves used to only target tourists, but they were getting bolder every day. I felt bad for her and wanted to take down her details, but the lights flickered. Odd. But hadn't Hans said something about electricians? Where was he, anyway? The old woman was looking at the glowing exit sign in terror. So it's true, she whispered. Another flicker. Then, the lights went out altogether. Steps rushed across the platform, empty except for me and the pickpocketed grandmother. I'd say footsteps, but I'm not entirely sure that it wasn't more like something crawling on all fours. In the pitch blackness beside me, the old woman let out a low moan. There were 2 snaps. The moan became a scream. And an instant later, the lights were back. It couldn't have taken more than 20 seconds. The old woman lay like a twisted puddle on the dirty tile of the platform. Both of her legs had been broken, twisted in opposite directions. She just laid there, clutching at the fast-darkening swollen spots on her legs. She was incapable of explaining what had happened to her in the dark, but she'd clearly wet herself out of pain or fear. This definitely hadn't been in the training video. A train pulled up. Almost all the passengers deliberately avoided looking at us, not wanting to get tangled up in problems. But a few helped me to get the poor woman straightened out, elevate her feet and neck, and keep her company while I used the emergency phone to summon help. Looks like the lights still aren't fixed. A sarcastic voice commented from behind me. Hans. The last person I wanted to see with my hands covered in old lady piss in the middle of a medical emergency. I lost my temper. Can you please go see if the paramedics have arrived yet? I snapped. Hans rolled his eyes and walked as slowly as possible towards the stairs. What the hell had just happened? You're back at Station X today, the manager told me the next morning. We really need to avoid any more unfortunate accidents like yesterday's. That wasn't a... The manager held up a hand, answered a ringing phone, and then turned back to me with sympathetic eyes. Hans won't be joining you. He isn't feeling well. My hands turned to fists, thinking about how much worse my already stressful job was going to be without a partner for protection. Isn't it against company policy to have an employee patrol alone? I protested. The manager's pitying expression turned frosty. Before you make waves, you might want to remember that you're still on your probationary period. We can let you go at any time. I'd hate for you to leave us without another job lined up. I left for Station X in a huff. The manager was an asshole, but he was right. I was 1 month's rent away from being on the street. I couldn't quit, even if what I was being asked to do wasn't in the rule book. Besides, I'd been turning the bizarre event over and over in my mind all night. There had to be a logical explanation for what had happened. Right? I imagined possible scenarios as I stood boredly on the platform of Station X, not even sure what I was supposed to be keeping an eye out for. Maybe the old lady just slipped. The hours stretched on, train doors opening and closing smooth as clockwork. I got used to Station X. By the end of the first day, I knew every gum-plastered bench, every cracked and grimy tile, every dead moth in the overhead lights. I even recognized the red, green, and yellow bulbs used to convey information to the drivers. That's why it was so strange to see those 2 points of white light in the darkness of the tunnel. I squinted. They were tiny and reflective, bright as an arc welder's flame, but gave off no spark. And they were getting closer. An instant before the train cut through the darkness, I saw him. A man in a white suit and a yellow silk shirt, standing just beyond the reach of the platform lights. Those tiny, burning lights? They were his eyes. Then came the train's shrill whistle, and he was gone. I shuddered, and wondered if so much time at Station X was getting to my head. Finally, my relief arrived. Another young rent-a-cop like me, without the seniority to get himself transferred away from this bizarre assignment. We exchanged a sad and knowing nod before I walked outside into the rain. I was surprised to see Hans waiting for me at the kiosk. He held a newspaper in front of his face like a comedy movie spy. A damp cigarette hung from his lips. Too good to cut out 5 minutes early like the rest of us, huh? He greeted me with a sneer. Then, suddenly, Hans shoved the newspaper into my chest. Here, I thought you should know. He walked off into the rain, still struggling to light his wet cancer stick. I sheltered in the kiosk and fought to fold up the newspaper. As I did, something fell out. A disc. I slipped it into my computer as soon as I got home, expecting some sick joke. Instead, I found security camera footage. 3 men walking down the familiar platform of Station X. The footage cut out for a moment. Then one man was leaning against the wall, clutching his hideously twisted arm. In the next recording, a young guard, just like me, observed passengers stepping out of a train. After several seconds of darkness, the video showed him lying on the ground, face up, but chest down. His head had been snapped backwards, and I didn't know whether to be relieved or disgusted that his chest, back, was still rising and falling with heavy breaths. Several more trains came and went before anyone stopped to help. I thought of the grandmother's words. So it is true. People knew something weird was going on at Station X. I had no doubt the manager did too. But I had bills to pay. The next day found me back on that platform, tense enough to snap, but no wiser than I'd been before I watched those awful recordings. It started around 9 a.m. I wished I was having a nightmare. I wished I could wake up. But those white-hot eyes staring at me from inside the tunnel were real. The lights flickered. The eyes moved closer. I could see the outline of the man in the yellow shirt, unchanged from the day before. Another flicker, and he was on the edge of the platform. Middle-aged, Asian, Korean maybe, fashionable. His eyes appeared normal beneath the platform lights. But an instant later, the darkness returned. And this time, it lasted for 6 of my thundering heartbeats. When it ended, he was standing beside me. New guy, huh? The man in the yellow shirt asked, as though he hadn't just crossed 20 meters in 6 seconds without making a sound. The way his face moved when he talked was all wrong. Like the face was just a mask for something else. Please step back, sir. I moved my hand to my belt with a confidence I didn't feel. The man in the yellow shirt grinned. When I tried to look in his eyes, the white light flashed and seared my irises, forcing me to stare dizzily at the ground. I let my hand fall to my side. It's you, isn't it? I mumbled helplessly. You're the one who's hurting people. I like the sounds they make. He shrugged. A train unloaded, and people flowed past me. Just another deadbeat security guard harassing a passenger. You're important. You know that? Not now. Later. The man in the yellow shirt tapped the side of his head with a long finger. A friend told me so. A long time ago. A friend who knows of things. So, unfortunately, I have to leave you whole and unbroken. Get your hands off me! A young man with a single diamond-studded earring whipped his hand across the cheek of a girl in high boots and jean shorts, who was clawing at his face with her nails. She was already cowering, but he smacked her again. It was nice talking to you. The man in the yellow suit cracked his neck. The lights flickered, and he was gone. The only evidence that he'd ever stood there was the fighting couple, who were quiet now that their hands had been shattered and shoved elbow deep down each other's throats. One of the paramedics told me that while their jaws could be reset, the damage to their hands was probably permanent. I just hoped they wouldn't have to share the same room in the hospital. After the hand incident, my manager's manager's manager apparently decided enough was enough. Station X was closed for 10 days due to construction. Someone even had the bright idea of putting up nets and barriers to keep up the sham. By the time the station reopened, the man in the yellow shirt was gone. Maybe he or it got bored and moved on. Maybe it found something else to entertain itself with. Who knows? After a week of no new accidents at Station X, I was reassigned to my regular rotation. But sometimes, usually when it's late and I haven't slept, or when I'm all alone on the empty platform, I'd swear I still see a pair of white irises burning in the darkness of the tunnel. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed today's first of 2 stories. I want to take a quick second to remind you to like, comment, and subscribe on this video. It really helps the channel grow and reach more new people. I was checking recently and saw that around half the people who watch the channel aren't yet subscribed, so I hope you'll take a quick second to hit that button if you haven't yet. Alright, now on to our next story. Go on in there, the duty sergeant sneered. Let's see what you learned in college. I was 20 years younger than the youngest guy in the department, and it showed. Even so, the way the duty sergeant threw me at the strangest and most dangerous cases had long since crossed the line from harassment and turned into something more menacing. I realized the rest of them wanted me to fail. They didn't like guys like me. Young guys. Guys who asked questions. Who did things by the book. It cramped their style. They wanted their old boys club back, even if that meant me getting my throat torn out. They'd all seen and probably done worse. I could see it in their eyes. Still, there didn't seem to be anything particularly threatening about the short, auburn-haired girl in the interrogation room. She was probably about half my weight. Her thick black glasses and pale skin made me think of a young librarian. But I knew better. I'd seen the photos. I knew what she was capable of. Hi, Katie. I'm Detective Maxwell. My eyes didn't leave her for a minute as I sat down. Well out of reach. Detective, huh? Katie laughed nervously. Why detective? I already explained everything to the man at the hospital. That man was a psychiatrist, Katie. I'm a police officer. Because your friends are deceased, it's important to establish exactly what happened between April 24th and May 10th on the eudaimonia. Can you explain those events to me as you remember them, Katie? Deceased? There was surprise in her wide green eyes. Could it be that she really didn't know? Dead. Of course they are. Katie buried her head in her arms. Things like this have followed me my whole life, you know? She wept. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to her comment. Stay with me, Katie, I commanded. I know this must be difficult for you, but the only way forward is for you to tell me exactly what happened on April 24th. Nick, Simone, Terry, Hugh, and me, we met in a classics class. In college. The professor was a real dick. He'd write on the board with one hand and erase with the other. And he'd fail you if you used a bibliography format he didn't like. Katie snorted. Anyway, the 5 of us bonded and we're friends ever since. We always thought it would be cool to take a trip to the Greek islands. See the place where all that ancient stuff happened, you know? This year, we finally got our chance. Katie took a deep breath. She kept glancing at the manila folder on the table. I wasn't ready to show her the pictures. Not yet. First, I had to hear as much of her story as I could. Establish a rapport. And then it would be time for the real questions. It was Terry who had the idea of renting a sailboat. I understand Terry Blankenship had some sailing experience. I offered. Pfft. Katie snorted through her tears. Yeah, right. Twice. With his uncle. On a fishing boat. But the boat we rented had like 4 cabins, 2 sails. It's way out of his league. When you say boat, You are referring to the eudaimonia, correct? I pushed. Katie nodded. There's been some suggestion that Terry rented the boat from a small local outfit because he knew that he didn't have the license or experience a more reputable firm would have demanded. What do you think about that, Katie? He just wanted to impress Simone. Katie shrugged. The water looked so calm. We didn't think anything bad would happen. Nicholas, the guy at the marina, he saw Terry's credit card and knew right away he was loaded. Once he saw that, I don't think he cared if we came back with the boat or not. It was an unusually long time before the authorities were alerted, I admitted. Let's not get out of order. You were telling me about your first day at sea. It was beautiful. Katie brightened. You've never seen anything so blue. Little white houses, tiny islands off in the distance. Getting tan on the deck with a guy I had a crush on since sophomore year. It was like a dream. Until the storm blew up. And when was that? That was the second day, so April 25th? We just finished the dinner Hugh cooked in the galley, and we were getting a card game set up below deck without too much enthusiasm. We were all pretty plastered from another long day drinking in the sun. It's probably why we didn't notice that the water had started to move differently. By the time we realized the rain was coming so hard and fast we couldn't see. Nobody knew how to prepare the boat, and Terry, he couldn't even take in the sail. It's all right, I reassured her, leaning farther forward than I probably should have. I know this is hard. What happened next? Capsized, that's what! Katie practically shrieked, and I jumped. I just remember holding on for dear life while these huge, frothy black waves slammed against the boat again and again. Nick and Hugh were yelling something. Terry got desperate. He cut the sail free. Then a wave righted us again, and on it went. Katie sniffed. We huddled in the wet interior, waiting to get flipped again, praying for dawn. Finally came. There's nothing but water all around. All our supplies were gone. The GPS, the safety devices, the backups, they were all missing or broken. I've never felt so helpless. A person can get pretty desperate in a situation like that, I hinted. We handled it pretty well for the first day. Tried to make signals, fix the equipment, even fish. There was that vague smile again. The one that darkened so quickly. Everything is blurry after that, Katie mumbled. Maybe it was the hunger or the thirst, but I can't. Sorry. What I'm trying to figure out here, Katie, I cleared my throat, is how you managed to survive 14 days adrift in a boat without food or water. I need you to remember what happened to the others, Katie. The others? She wrinkled her forehead doubtfully. I took the first picture out of the manila folder. It showed the walls of a ship's cabin, gouged deep with fingernail marks, and a door ripped brutally from its hinges. For example, how did this happen? I insisted. Katie shrugged. I produced another photo. Another cabin, the bedding shredded, the walls splattered with blood. That's our ship. Katie seemed to recognize it for the first time. I'd saved the most disturbing photograph for last. The gnawed-upon bones of Terry, Simone, Hugh, and Nick scattered around the galley. Katie brought a hand to her mouth. When the medics found you and pumped your stomach, Katie, they found the remains of your friends. Inside of you, Katie. I need to understand how that happened. I told you, Katie said, suddenly cold. Cursed. She pushed the photos back across the table at me. When this happened, I guess hunger and thirst had already weakened me so much that I couldn't fight it off. What is it, Katie? My shadow. You're saying your shadow made you do this? I leaned back and crossed my arms. wondering if she'd step into my verbal trap and admit that she'd torn apart and eaten her friends. Look at me. Katie held up her scrawny arms and delicate fingers. Do I look like I could rip a door off its hinges? Claw through a wall? Or eat someone piece by piece? You tell me, Katie. At that, she clammed up. I changed track. Tell me more about your shadow. My dad always used to say that he'd made some powerful people very angry, and that one day they'd get him back. I was just a kid back then. I didn't associate his warning with the creepy old lady who offered me a gold coin for 13 strands of my hair. By the time I told my parents what happened, it was too late. My shadow had begun to change. It whispers to me, you know? It tells me to hurt. To let it take over. Usually I fight it off, but sometimes, when I'm really struggling, I give in. And the consequences are terrible. There's a reason why Terry, Simone, Hugh, and Nick were my first real friends since grade school. Nobody wanted to hang out with the girl who bit her bully's ear off, you know? Katie, I began. Have you ever been checked for mental illness? I bit off a girl's ear. Katie snorted. What do you think? She hesitated. This is different. I'm fine unless my shadow takes over. Can you let your shadow take over now? I asked, fascinated. You wouldn't survive it. It's time for us to lay everything out on the table, Katie. I stood sternly, my hands on my hips. You're facing a very long prison sentence for the murders of your friends. We have evidence from under your fingernails, your teeth, even from inside your stomach. Unless you can show me who was really responsible. You really want to know? Katie's voice became a throaty rumble that seemed to shake the walls of the interrogation room. The camera stopped working. Katie's shadow was nowhere to be seen in the flickering fluorescent light. Then open your eyes. She stood, snapping the chains on her wrists as if they were made of straw. I bolted before she could reach me, and I was greeted by the laughter of the duty sergeant and the others outside. Scared of a little girl, college boy? He teased. You go in there, then, I panted. The duty sergeant could tell by my pale face that something was going on. But when the other officers flung the door open, we were treated to a vision of Katie, looking calm and a little confused in her chair. The duty sergeant gave me a wry smile, but it faded pretty quick when he saw that Katie's chains were broken. When my hands had stopped shaking long enough to finish a styrofoam cup of watery coffee, I made my way back to the interrogation room and found that Katie was gone. Removed for my safety, the duty sergeant claimed. But in my dreams, I still see the narrow-windowed metal door to Katie's interrogation room, swallowed by a living shadow. The case of the eudaimonia was like a splinter in my brain. And when I finally got the time and seniority I needed to dive into that rabbit hole, I didn't like what was waiting for me in the archives. Katie was found guilty, of course. That was only normal, given the amount of evidence against her. But there was nothing normal about what happened around her in prison. The abusive male guard who was found leaning dead against the cold concrete wall opposite Katie's cell, with his eyes scorched out of his skull. The sadistic inmate who simply disappeared, until what was left of her was found clogging the toilet of the cell she shared with Katie. The blackout in the shower room. The screams as the guards fought to open the door. The bloody torrent running down the drain from the shattered shower heads. The broken bodies heaped around where Katie crouched, rocking back and forth, holding herself, tears streaming down her cheeks. Unexplained transfers and gruesome incidents followed Katie wherever she went. Almost like a shadow. I know I shouldn't be obsessing over these old cases. It's a bad path to start down. The kind that only tends to lead to the bottom of a bottle. Problem is, the last time I checked Katie's file, there was a new note. She's been released. I wonder who her shadow will touch next.
Become a channel member today for early access, bonus videos, and special emojis only available to members. Check out the description below or click the join button for more info. If you'd like another way to help support the channel, please consider joining my Patreon page at patreon.com/JordanGroupeHorror. As a patron, you'll get access to bonus videos and content. You'll be credited at the end of every video going forward, and if you decide to stay for 3 months, I'll name a character after you which will be featured in a Hollow's End story. Links to join the Patreon are in the description. Thanks everyone for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment to help the channel continue to grow. And see you again next time at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Hope you have a great night.